Hi, and welcome to this Roadrunner Photography Tours tutorial on changing skies. So we have here is an image of a mountain with a lovely blue sky, one of my favorite shooting conditions of all times. Not. And, but I like the mountain and I thought it was interesting. And I want it to be different. It needs some other feature. Now, one solution, if you did maybe the easy route is to just say, okay, I don't need that much sky and I can focus it. It's more pano. But, maybe I want that sort of breadth and vastness of it. So I don't want to necessarily start with a crop. So let's think about some ways that we might be actually able to make a difference here, make this image a little bit more appealing by adding a different type of cloud into it. So one thing that we're going to try is think about is this image here. Now, this is a Shutterstock image. I shoot skies. This was downloaded for just a different project, but it was an easy and good example of this sort of singular sky that we can drop over this mountain. So you can see that kind of at a glance, the sky itself is, close, maybe not exactly the same color, but it's similar enough as a good starting point. So you should always look to make sure that your images you're combining make some sense, that they're doable. So we're going to start with this one. We're not going to make any changes yet. What we really want to do is get this cloud into the other tab. So to do that, we're going to choose the Move tool. So if you're familiar with the keyboard keystrokes, it's tap the V key and your cursor will change from whatever tool you're in this case the brush tool, to an arrow with 4 arrows. That's the Move tool. For me, my tools in Photoshop, my workspace, are over here to the right, and if you look at the top here and I hover, you will see that the Move tool is just 4 arrows on the toolbar. You can also just click on this, click off, click on it, and you will have the Move tool as well. So first things first, we need to pick this image up and we need to carry it over to the other image. So we could copy and paste, we could place, there's all different ways. I find the easiest to basically left click, hold, and then pick the image up, carry it over, come into our image, and just drop it. Boom, we're done. So now, because we can't quite see through this and to see where it's placed, I'm just going to change the opacity for a minute so that I can align it where I want it. So maybe about right there. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make the opacity 100% again. Now, I sort of like to work top down. That's just sort of my style. I could do it from here, but I like the idea of my base image is the mountain and I want to bring the cloud into it as opposed to bringing the mountain into the cloud photo. So I'm going to go over here to my layers and I'm going to click on the layer with the mountain, which is layer 0 in this case. And I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to left click hold, and I'm going to drag that layer up until I get this little blue bar, which you can see it kind of show it. As soon as you see it, you can let go. And now my mountain is on top, cloud is on the bottom. Now, Blend If has, and I do by no means know all of its features, but I do know how to use it for some things. And this is just a cool technique to use. If you double click to the gray, so I'm going to do that again, but over here to the right of the word layer, if I double click on that, I will be changing the name and I can put mountain, right? So I can change the name of a layer. That's easy, but I don't want to necessarily do that. I really just want to activate the layer adjustments. Actually, layer effects is what it's called. Now, one way to do that is by clicking this icon. If you go to the bottom of the layers panel, it has FX for effects. I actually prefer to get into it where I get the whole panel of effects instead of picking one. So I'm going to double click over here in this gray space on my layer and I get this box which is called a layer style. Now on the blending options, which is your first option or your first mode that you land in, now there's a ton of things here underneath. They all have different features. I have other videos that use other features. This is particular to blending 2 layers together. You just want to be on blending options, and you'll see here in this bottom section that it says Blend If, and it's using gray, but if you want you can use red, green, or blue. For this technique, gray works fine. And it says Blend If this layer, so that means the layer that I'm on, the mountain layer, is dark, light, or in the middle, or Blend If the underlying layer is dark, light, or somewhere in the middle. Now, what we know about, I'm going to cancel for a second, what we know about this is our cloud is light, right? It's got white pixels in it, and we are trying to blend those white pixels into a blue sky. So by definition, those pixels are going to be lighter than the layer that we're on. So bring this back up with a double click. So we're going to say blend if the underlying layer is lighter, right? So we're going to start over here in the whites, and we're going to take these carrots. Now this carrot is expandable. It starts out as a single carrot. We're going to go ahead and start to drag this to the right. And as I do it, you'll see that that cloud is starting to take shape. Whoop, now I've gone a little too far. So that's because I didn't split the carrot open. I just kind of went for the global, this big global change. So I went back a little bit to the right. Now I'm going to hold down the Alt or Option key on the keyboard, and I'm going to split them apart and just keep dragging over. Now I can go quite a ways, and you can tell now I've gone too far because I'm starting to see the sky. So I'm going to back that back off until that disappears. Now I feel like a little bit of this cloud right here on the right hand side where the hand is could stand to come in, so I'm just going to drag this back over. And you just kind of have to play with it. Now I got them back together, so that's too much. So if you just play with it a little bit, you'll see like pretty readily I've got a good cloud. It fits nicely, it's pretty complete, and I can just hit OK. Now I don't have a mask or anything. I could have tried to mask this, but that would have taken truly a month of Sundays to keep the soft edges of the cloud intact. This blend if does that because these pixels are actually lighter than the blues that it's blending with. So without doing much of anything, I was able to bring these two images together and drop a cloud in here. So it's a pretty cool feature. Very simple, very fast. Boom, cloud's done. Now I could actually go about processing these images. So I would probably tone down my cloud a little bit just because it is pretty bright up here, and I would fix the white balance and make some adjustments to the mountain as well using Camera Raw, and then ultimately when I was finished, these images would come together as a single final image. So before we call that done, I think that we should look at another option for blending the clouds. So in this case, I'm going to come back, I'm going to double click, open back up my blend if, and I'm just going to drag it all back to the right, get it set back to normal, and I am going to delete this particular cloud because I want to try something different. This time, I actually want to do this and incorporate these clouds. Now, these clouds were taken in Iceland. The mountain is taken in the United States in New Mexico. So completely different environment, but I want to show you how you can actually take something that's completely divergent and blend it together. So in this case, I want to grab the image again, same way I did with the white cloud and the blue sky. With my move tool, I've already gotten it selected. I hadn't done anything different, so it's still the tool that I have. I'm going to go ahead, left click and hold, and pick the image up, and I'm going to hover again over the mountain, bring the cursor into the frame, or this will not drop the image, and let it go. Now, first and foremost, beyond the fact that there's a glaring difference in the white balance, which we will adjust in a minute, there's a difference in the size. So what I want to do, because it's one thing to like reduce pixels, make something smaller when you're doing a composite. You know, the way that works in Photoshop is that pixels are dumped when you're reducing size, but if you kind of know where you're going with that, that's not necessarily a bad thing. However, when you're trying to make something bigger, you're trying to expand the pixels to fill a space. In this case, we're going to make this sky bigger to fill above the mountain. If you do it right now, if you just transform this and start pulling, you're going to stretch pixels, and at some point they're going to look beaten to death, is the only way to look at it. So the way that you solve that problem is to take a layer and make it a smart object. This way, Photoshop doesn't just stretch pixels, it actually replicates pixels and keeps the content intact. It's the best way to preserve the quality of the images that you're blending. So to do that, you can see that layer 1 is the layer with the clouds. We're going to right click again off into the gray area so we get the drop down menu, and we're going to choose Convert to Smart Object. So go ahead and do that. You can see it's done, and you see this little white piece like sort of paper in the right hand corner. That's how you know that's a smart object compared to the mountain, which is not a smart object, at least at this point. So now that we've done that, we can free transform the image. To do that, we're going to choose Edit, Free Transform, or hit Command or Control T on your keyboard. You get these bounding bars and you get this crosshatch. You know that you're ready to start pulling the image to make it bigger. There's no rhyme or reason to it. You just want to make sure that you have enough image to cover the sky, kind of align it, and hit Enter to keep the transformation. Now, as I mentioned a little earlier, I like to work backwards. So I'm going to actually bring my mountain on top of this image again. I'm going to come over, I'm going to choose the mountain layer, and I'm going to left click and hold. I'm going to drag up until I get a blue line. I'm going to let go. Now we get to see the mountain. Now instead of using blend if, and I can show you what that would look like, there's almost no way for it to make sense. If I say, is it lighter, I might get the sky, but I've wiped out part of the image. If I say, is it darker, I could actually drop this whole scene pretty close and have a snow scene in the background. Probably a little unrealistic to not have any snow on the ground with all the snow on the mountains. So those things don't work. That's not the way to handle this particular image. So we're going to hit cancel. But what we are going to do is mask. So this is an opportunity to use the magic wand tool actually. So you come over here, you'll see your fourth tool down. It should, in most cases, if not you might have to look for it, your fourth tool down will be the selection tool. You might be in the quick selection tool as I am now. If you right click on that tool, you should see magic wand. We're going to go ahead and grab it. Now what the magic wand tool does is it selects like pixels, and in this case the sky is actually pretty consistent. Not often does that happen, especially depending on the time of day. If you're starting into sunrise or after sunrise and into sunset, you start getting transitional color. This won't work. You'd have to use the quick selection tool. But in this case, the wand tool should give us a complete selection, and with one left click I've selected the entire sky along the ridge line of the mountain. So we're going to go ahead at this point and create a mask. So to do that, we're going to come down to on our layers panel all the way to the bottom. You'll see this little icon that looks like a camera. And go ahead and if you hover, it'll say add layer mask. Go ahead and do that. Okay, that didn't really work, right? Because what we selected was the sky, and so what it's giving us and revealing is the sky. So we're going to undo with a Command or Control Z. So we've still got our selection intact, we just don't have a mask. We're going to inverse the selection. So we come to the Select menu at the top, it'll drop down, and you will see the word Inverse. So it is a Shift, Command or Control I. That's how you inverse a selection as opposed to inversing a layer mask. So we can do that. Now you can see that our mountain has the marching ants around it. The sky is unselected, which means we don't want it. We'll come back, hit the mask tool again. Now we've got our sky. Now for the most part that worked pretty well. You'll see that we have a little bit of dirt here that we shouldn't have. Yes, their colors are not the same, we're not there yet, but we also have this halo on our mask, and the halo is created, or on the mountain, because the blue sky is like sort of basically being reflected. Those pixels bumping up against each other have basically created a reflection that felt very natural when we had a blue sky, but doesn't feel natural at all in the moment. It gives a dark line. So we're going to fix that. So before we bother with the dirt, we're going to deal with the mask. So with the mask selected, so it has a white bar around it, we're going to come over to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and we're going to leave it at 2 pixels. I have done this once for another video, and so it's already there. But say for instance you were doing something else and you had 16, you can see that this is way too much blur. So we don't want that. We're going to go ahead and undo what we did, come back in, Blur, Gaussian Blur, make sure this is about 2 pixels. That's about all you need to get rid of that halo, and hit OK. So we still have a halo, we have a fuzzy edge. We're going to fix the fuzzy edge. So again, with the mask selected, we're going to come to Image, Adjustments, Levels. Now you could have just hit Command or Control L to get the menu, but this is an easy way so you know where to look. We choose that and we get the Levels menu. So to get rid of the halo, we're going to actually, you have 3 carets here. You have highlights, midtones, and shadows. We're going to grab the shadows caret and we're going to drag it to the right. And you can see that if you watch closely, let me see if I can bring this in. Just watch along the top edge as I drag to the right. As I do this, so this is where it was. As I drag to the right, you will start to see that halo completely disappears. And you can stop whenever you're satisfied. You can take it all the way to the end, but there's really no need. I go to about right here. This is usually a comfortable place when I play with this. So that's an idea, but if you needed to, you could still go all the way down to the bottom. It doesn't really matter. It is whatever it is needed for the mask that you're working. But if you look now, we don't have a halo anywhere. So we're going to go ahead and hit OK because our mask is perfect. Now, we still have the dirt. So how do we fix that? We click on the layer that says now layer 1. If we want to rename that layer, say Iceland, or could have been clouds, or maybe Iceland clouds. Now we've changed it. This is a good way to stay organized by naming your layers so you can keep track. With this layer selected, I will do free transform again, which is Command or Control T. I get my bounding bars, and now all I need to do is just pull this down enough so that the dirt disappears behind the mountain and all I have is cloud cover. Hit enter, I save that transformation. Now, I still have this issue of white balance and light. So the clouds are a little bit dark for the scene, at least as a starting point, and it's certainly not the same color. There's a couple different ways to approach it. I can change the white balance of the mountains, or because the mountains were shot sort of as the light was changing, maybe I want to just start off with that color. Maybe that's the color I prefer. It doesn't really matter either way. The easiest thing to do is actually to come down to your adjustment layers, and do color balance and start to kind of play with it. So in this case, the color balance layer went between the two. That was because I was between my mountain and my clouds. That's because I was on the cloud layer. So if I undo that so you can see it again, I'm still on the cloud layer from the transformation. I want to manipulate the layer of the color of the clouds to bring it closer to the color of the mountain. So because I'm wanting to manipulate the color of clouds, I need the layer to go right above the clouds, the adjustment. So I choose an adjustment layer, I pick color balance, and you'll see that it drops it in here, and then I get the adjustment tool. It has a white mask because, as we just saw with the mountain, white reveals, black hides. So we're not seeing the blue sky. This is all white, which means it will have 100% of this mask is on 100% of these pixels. Everything is going to be impacted by the adjustment. So at this point, I just kind of need to play a little bit to sort of start getting colors that make sense. Actually, probably a little bit towards magenta. I don't want it to go green. But now, actually, that's not too bad. The clouds now feel more or cooler, more in line with the mountain. Now on the flip side, say I want to bring the mountain to the cloud a little bit. If I select the mountain layer, now when I select the adjustment and I say color balance, it is now sitting above the mountain. The difference between this one, this color adjustment and the first color adjustment is that the way Photoshop works is it impacts everything going down. If it wasn't for this mask being here, any adjustment I do here would also impact the clouds all the way through. So the thing that's saving us is that I'm not revealing the sky. So in this case, I want to sort of tone warm the mountain. Ooh, actually, see, I'm being corrected. Because this is above, and I'll just do something dramatic, I'm changing the whole thing. And it has nothing to do with the mask. Why? Because although I'm hiding the blue sky, I'm revealing the clouds. So in an effort to not have that be the case, because I only want to impact the mountain itself, I need to clip this color adjustment layer that I've got selected to the mountain image. And to do that, I can either come over here to the right and right click and choose create a clipping mask. Right? That did it. Now you see this is blue again and the mountain is great, this beautiful green yellow color. Or If I undo that, the other way to do it is hover over the adjustment, hold down the Alt or Option key, and you will get this little down arrow. One left click, you'll see the clipping mask appear. So now this color adjustment is not affecting the clouds we just fixed, but only impacting the mountain. So just to get back to normal, I'm going to hit 0 for both so it's not so dramatic. Now I just need to sort of play with this until I get a color that sort of matches. And it is just, again, it is all experimentation and what's pleasing to the eye, but that's probably pretty good. So I'm gonna go ahead and close this. Now I have, start over, I have this set of clouds from Iceland, kind of green, kind of weird color. It's corrected and made warmer, or excuse me, cooler by this color balance adjustment. I bring in the clouds. It's too blue, kind of magenta. Those clouds are corrected, or excuse me, those clouds. The mountain is corrected by this color balance layer, and I can continue to play with that more in this arena, or I can consider this done. Now the way I like to do blendings of images is to get them as close as I can in their completely natural state. Like there's been no other pixel changes to these images, literally just brought them together. And then now I would take them in and either flatten the layer, because I'm never going to want a purple mountain and I'm never going to want that blue sky back, and I'm perfectly happy with this cloud set. So at this point I would probably flatten the layer and work with it as a single image in Camera Raw until I got the image to the rest of the way to be finished, that I would share it. If at some point you think, wait, I don't think I've done enough to the mountain or to the clouds, all you need to do is actually double click on the symbol for the adjustment layer. So if I double click on this balance for color balance, I get the options again to start manipulating the adjustment, and I can continue to push and pull it to get to where I want. Again, this is all to taste. This is not a final image. It's just an idea about how to blend these. At this point, if I wanted to flatten the image and take it into Photoshop, or excuse me, Camera Raw to continue processing it, I would just choose Layer, Flatten Image, and boom. Now it's blended. Now it's basically as if I'd shot it this way to start with, and I can come in, Filter, Camera Raw, and begin the process of sharpening, fixing more colors, adding contrast, maybe taking it to black and white, and just figuring out what I want to do with it to consider it a final image. Thanks again for watching. Hope this has been helpful. Take care. We'll see you soon.